One of the most common criticisms or questions regarding Christopher Nolan's 2014 space epic Interstellar revolves around Tom Cooper, modestly played by the talented Casey Affleck. Many people believe he contributes little to no value in the story as just another character in an already large cast, and removing him from the film would change almost nothing. But I'm here to say that I think many of these people misunderstand his purpose in the film. So today, I want to explain that although he certainly can be easily overlooked, especially when compared to many of the other more prominent and pivotal characters in Interstellar, such as Cooper, Professor Brand, and Murph, his presence in the film adds another important layer that symbolizes humanity's inextinguishable hope, even against their drastically worsening conditions and increasing perilousness on a dying Earth, and provides an interesting contrast to Murph's adamant personality and actions. So, without further ado, let's get started.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
We are in very serious trouble.
Look, Jeffrey Dahmer was eating the shit out of niggas' heads.
He's the one.
Throughout the beginning of the film, Tom acts like a typical teenager, seen when he teases Murph and enthusiastically drives through the cornfield, but he doesn't seem nearly as affected by the harsh conditions of Earth as he does later after members of his family have started to die, because as the world worsens, so does Tom. Presumably in a way similar to many of the other people on Earth, he becomes more and more pessimistic towards the increasingly bleak situation he faces as the film progresses, reaching its peak in the tense climax during his emotional confrontation with Murph. At the beginning of the film though, when Tom is still only 15 years old, his advisors rule out college and recommend that he become a farmer like his father. But unlike his father, who wanted to explore and push the limits of humanity's potential, Tom actually likes to farm and wants to be a farmer.
I like what you do. I like our farm.
I'll be great at it.
Just like most of the other remaining inhabitants on Earth, he's content with living unremarkably instead of being a revolutionary scientist like Murph or embarking on a perilous mission to save mankind like Cooper. When Cooper leaves, the growing disparity between Tom and Murph becomes even more apparent. Compared to Murph's emotional goodbye, Cooper's farewell with Tom is far quicker and more apathetic. This contrast doesn't simply place the focus of the remaining Earth scenes onto Murph instead of Tom, but it also foreshadows the apathetic mentality Tom will eventually possess. Later in the film, after having made a family of his own, Tom, despite knowing how uninhabitable the Earth had become, and despite realizing that its already damaging conditions were only going to get even worse, doesn't try to solve the problem, but instead, like most of Earth's inhabitants, simply attempts to survive it. Murph, though, actively searches for a solution and in the process experiences a wider range of emotions surrounding Cooper's journey into space and Professor Brand's betrayal. Her confidence and faith in Cooper and humanity wavers throughout the film as she eventually takes on the burdensome and monumental task of saving humanity herself.
It's up to me.
You're gonna save everybody. His dad couldn't do it.
Dad didn't even try! Dad just abandoned us!
Tom, though, had become mostly desensitized to the hardships of life on Earth and nearly believed humanity could no longer be saved. So he chooses not to leave his dangerously dusty house to go live with Murph, even though living in his house was killing his children. Regardless of whether or not they left the house, Tom thought it would only be a matter of time until they all died. So he'd rather comfortably stay where he had lived his entire life, instead of scrambling to survive. This sentiment probably mirrors how many other people on Earth felt. Rather than chaotically searching for a way to escape, they had become somewhat apathetic to their fate. Through Tom's actions and increasingly indifferent personality, we can judge how many others were experiencing Earth's death. Though Tom wasn't originally so seemingly unemotional towards everything, he grew into it. Contrasting against Murph's dramatic and emotional ride throughout the film, Tom has a far more stoic presence, and with his unexcited personality, he seems hopeless in the face of what he believes to be an almost completely unavoidable death on Earth. However, despite appearing to have given up, Tom also in fact possesses the inextinguishable hope of humanity. Even though his faith in his father shakes, it never completely fades away. Tom, throughout the entire film, never believes that Cooper had forsaken them, even though Murph had given up on their father long ago. While an angry Murph who had felt abandoned and betrayed abstained from messaging Cooper for decades, Tom continued sending him messages for years, even though he thought Cooper couldn't or simply wouldn't respond to or even watch them.
You aren't listening to this, I know that. All these messages are just drifting.
His wife felt that his one-sided relationship with his father had become meaningless and harmful to Tom, so she told him to let Cooper go, but he never fully discarded his last bit of hope, even when his situation seemed hopeless. Until the end, Tom, like most of humanity, held out just the slightest bit of faith in something or someone that they would find a way to survive. After everything he had endured, after all the hardships he had been through, and after all the people he had lost, Tom perseveres. In Tom's final scene, we see Murph rush up and passionately hug him after she finally figures out what Cooper had been communicating to her. In this moment, an extraordinarily dirty Tom, representative of the dangerously growing hostility of Earth's environment, doesn't seem quite so detached anymore. At one of his most vulnerable points in the film, just after a very emotional argument with Murph, Tom looks relieved, as though his faith and hope had finally been justified. Unlike Murph, who had access to an enormous amount of information and could actively search for solutions to Earth's many problems, Tom was just an average guy. The film clearly established this early on with his unremarkable test scores compared to Murph, who, even at a young age, showed great intellectual promise. Doing so creates a parallel between Tom and the rest of humanity. He becomes the analog through which we can understand what it's like to live on such a hostile and unforgiving planet as he endures great pain and loss, likely in a way very similar to countless other Earth inhabitants. Although most people consider Murph and Cooper's relationship to be the heart of the film, and rightfully so, Tom's importance to the story shouldn't be overlooked either. His progression, though it may not be nearly as intimate and emotional as many of the other characters, represents humanity's growing adversity and desperation on this dying planet, but also their seemingly inextinguishable hope in the face of insurmountable odds. Even though the world may have pushed him into his uncaring and unemotional state, he never completely abandons his faith that he'll somehow persevere. Tom shows that humanity, even when we seem broken and unredeemable, always keeps a little hope. Thanks for watching.